Welcome back. Today we have a great guest, Devin Johnson, the founder of First Mile. An incredible conversation about logistics and his rise. Enjoy the episode.
Well, I want to talk a little bit of football first, if that's cool. See, Devin played, is it linebacker? Is that what you said? Is like Mike linebacker in high school?
Yep, high school, yeah.
Did you say it was Olympus or Scout?
Tight end, Brighton.
Brighton. Yeah, that's right.
Bengals,
The
man.
Bengals. That's right. Reno Mahe. That's right. I was a
Reno
Cottonwood Colt. We
Mahe.
never won anything ever.
Okay.
Yeah, we were terrible.
He was a bit older than me, but
Brighton Bengals. You know that Brighton was famous at Cottonwood for having the prettiest girls. Did you know that?
yeah, I would guess that.
He knows.
We did have a beautiful people over there.
You had the beautiful people at Brighton. Yeah,
The whole Salt Lake Valley. I mean, Hillcrest, Olympus, Skyline had a slew of beautiful girls, you know.
good humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's telling me the story. Tell AJ the story about when he played against Reno Mahe.
I will never forget it. It's deep in my DNA. The most
Deep in your DNA.
the most humiliated I've ever been, at least from a sporting perspective.
Uh-huh.
Because I was a freshman and I got to go practice with varsity, right? So it's like this big deal. So I got this big head and I get to go in to practice and I was playing D-end. And Reno was playing back at tailback and it was a single back, you know, so I was like, okay.
Pretty straightforward.
He's getting the ball, and I'm going to smoke him. I'm making a name
That's
for
right.
myself
That's
here,
right.
you know.
Here's the freshman.
This is my moment right here.
So
Watch me.
So I shed the tight end. Reno comes out on a sweep. And do you know who Reno Mahe was? Do you remember him?
I
He
know the
played in
name.
the NFL.
I can't remember, but
Oh,
I know
he
the
played
name.
for BYU and NFL.
That's
He was-
incredible.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
kickoff
Shiftiest son of gun
returner.
you ever
and-
met.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, he got the ball, came around the outside, and you know, I go to make a name for myself. And in like the blink of an eye, my face is in the dirt. You know, I'm like,
Oh,
what just
dude,
happened?
yeah.
Everyone on the sidelines yelling, "Oh, freshman!"
You're like, oh, it's all
You know,
relative.
he just gave me one quick little step, and I
You're
just
gone. Got the
dive
broken
into the
ankles.
dirt, man.
Dude, Reno,
Like,
come on, man. Help a
just-
freshman out.
And I was like, okay, I'm in a different element right
Dude,
now.
oh, seriously? You had to be pretty good, though, as a freshman to be playing against the seniors, though.
Well, I mean, I was the beat up dummy. You know, they just needed some bodies to beat up on him. You know,
I think that's pretty
And you
impressive.
volunteered for that even. You
Yeah, I
wanted
volunteered.
that. That's what's crazy
he's all
about
about
sign
it.
me up, coach.
Yeah.
I'm riding for
That's
the
a
brand.
tough dude.
I know,
But I think,
right?
Devin, I think tough dude. I mean, you look like you came out of Yellowstone. Like you're like one of the cool guys.
Those are cool boots, by the way. What are those? Are those? Is that a certain
It's like snake skin or
Skin or
something.
These are lizard.
lizard
See, I
skin?
told you,
Okay.
he's a cool dude.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Devin, I wanted to ask you about, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before, we started rolling, but Utah State, I mean, from a fellow Aggie to
Are
a
we
fellow
rolling right now? Like, do I
Aggie.
need to scrub my language a little bit and be appropriate in my answers?
Yeah, we'll
yet?
call
Or
it Vid
are we
Angel.
Are we official yet?
Yeah, well, I think we're officially on. Yeah.
Okay.
We're moving forward. So
I'll behave. You guys concur we're live?
okay.
Does this mean I'm not doing my hands right?
What do I do with my hands?
Anchorman.
What do I do with my hands?
Here's the next invention. Just a little attachment. You just hang on your neck, and it just holds in perfect
Oh,
placement.
that is brilliant.
Wouldn't be distracting at all.
No, it'd be perfect. It's a
Yeah.
perfect invention.
Or we
to
could just use a
resell.
lapel and it just clips right on your shirt and then you just talk
Tech.
that
That's a
way.
little too techy.
Yeah.
So was ice cream
love
always as good? Is it better at Utah State or is it better at the BYU Creamery? That's the question.
Is there any question about that, Devin?
I don't
we know.
even,
No,
we
let me
I
tell
don't
you.
even
No,
know if it's debatable.
Look,
I know exactly. Why
There's
would
a
be
Rockwell ice cream down at downtown Provo.
Okay, that is good.
And they have, it's like, I don't know what it is. It's some sort of like honeycomb.
Yeah.
It
It's amazing.
will blow your mind.
It's amazing. I've had it many times. It's awesome.
Yeah, I feel really bad because I go in there and I look around at the people and everyone's got like these little kid scoops.
But that's
and
not
I'm
from
like,
BYU, is it? That's their
No,
own deal.
that's
No,
what I'm
they
trying
do
to-
their own thing.
Well, whoever they are, they're amazing. They're
They
better
Yeah,
they
than
make
I
it
don't-
in their own back room.
Yeah,
right
I don't
there.
know
It's
if you
cool.
could compare Rockwell and
Rockwell was
Creamery at
insane.
Utah State.
But I mean, everyone has their like little dainty thing, like a little kid's cup, and I'm like, give me the triple. Or something.
I want it
just
all.
bring in the Home Depot 5-gallon bucket.
That's
Like,
exactly
I'm just
right.
here for my
I want it all.
refill.
Yeah, give me all you got.
Yeah.
There's like this Parks and Recs episode where Ron Swanson's like, I want all the bacon and eggs you have. And he said, just to make sure we're clear, I didn't say bring me a lot of. I said bring me all the bacon and eggs you have. That's how I feel like when I'm at Rockwell. Yeah, they could.
I love it.
Oh yeah, they're good. So
you went to Utah State then, and
I went to Utah State.
Cool things up there.
Yep. I went to Utah State for a bit. It was a great place to be.
where do you study?
Well, we leave that part out.
Let's skip over that one.
I'm not really bona fide Aggie because I dropped out.
And that's actually even more bona fide.
So I still
Every cool entrepreneur.
They really are.
drops
They're
out.
the ones who drop out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I studied my social environment, and I got sucked in by the allure of door-to-door sales and got distracted with
Made some money though.
career and
Pest control or dish or what was it?
started with Dish. Yep.
Okay.
This is
And,
pre-Vivint, right?
Yep.
is
Well,
before
I
Vivint
mean,
was
it
around.
existed as Apex, but I wasn't working for Apex.
Yeah, but this is like way back at my day when those things didn't
Yeah, this is
exist.
my first. I mean, it wasn't back when it started. You know, that kind of environment I think probably kicked off late '90s.
Yep.
You know, my first summer I went to Denver, and that was in 2004. So about that time.
Yeah, I remember walking down. I did my undergrad at UVU in their business school, and some guy starts walking down the hall, and he was like, it was just like right at the beginning of like the Vivint era and everything else.
The door-to-door phenomenon.
He comes out with this full length fur jacket, and I was like, what on earth? And you know, he's just basically showing like, you know, we've got some crazy capabilities to make some money. So anyway, that was kind of that was crazy, but. That was the big deal back then.
Yeah,
to me, it was shady.
Wine
I
and
was like,
dine
dude,
you was kind of the name of the game, and you know,
fur coats. Did you wear a fur coat?
I didn't qualify. You probably had to sell just enough to get the fur coat incentive.
Joe
I
Namath
must have
fur
missed
coat?
the fur coat incentive.
I'd have been like, I'm going to sell just under that because I don't want the fur coat. No, thank you. I'm good.
Those would be pretty heavy.
Show me the money.
But,
So speaking of which, you've got some. You do the hunting stuff, right? You've got.
I don't do a lot of hunting per se. I spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I didn't grow up hunting, so I didn't really learn that skill much.
But you're an outdoorsy guy.
I do a lot of fishing. I have a lot of friends that are hardcore hunters, and I've been out with a few. I enjoy going. I do sometimes wonder, like, if I walk up on an animal and his big beady eyes are looking up at me after I just put a hole in him.
If you could do it, I know. I'm the
Like,
same
what'd
way.
you do that for?
You jerk.
Yeah, like,
I know. I'm the same way. Like, I want to
so-
think that I'd be a good hunter, but I'm like,
Yeah.
the reality is I'd be like crying.
Yeah.
Like, oh, shoot. What
yeah,
did I do?
I don't know.
Jeremy's
but,
a soft heart, right?
Yeah, I would.
But I
think
love
that.
the trophies. I mean, we got trophies in our gas station, in our restaurant, and I think they're just beautiful. I think surrounding yourself in nature is a very grounding thing.
So
But I don't
most.
spend a lot of time pulling the trigger.
I want to hear
myself right now.
about your cattle from. Is it Ireland or what are they?
Scotland.
Scotland.
Harry Coos.
So those are
Harry
like the
Coos.
really furry, good-looking ones that look like pets.
Okay.
They're like the Shih Tzu version of like just normal
Okay.
Longhorns. But those things are gorgeous.
They are pretty. They're a special animal. I mean, they go back forever. I kind of fell in love with them about, I guess it would have been maybe 10, 12 years ago. We were up in the Highlands, up in Scotland, and driving around by Lake Loch Ness, and we come around this bend, and there's just this big old bull on the side of the road, and I'd never seen. I mean, I knew it was a cow, but I didn't know what type. So we pull over. I'm
yeah.
taking pictures, asking around. I figure out kind of what breed it is, and start learning about them. And we were just renting this little house down in Murray at that time, and I told my wife, "Hey, we're gonna have some of these someday." And she's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Yeah, right. We're
Amen.
gonna put them in our backyard."
In the
I'm like, I don't know.
backyard, yeah.
I haven't solved for that problem yet. I just know.
But it's coming.
Something got wrapped up in my guts with this affinity for this particular breed, and so yeah, I guess it would have been about 4 or 5 years ago. We had enough sort of resources like land that we could bring them in and start raising them and start pulling my hair out trying to
Yeah, that makes me really.
figure it out. It's not a.
It's not a hobby.
They're beautiful on a picture,
But it's a lot of work.
But keeping them alive and healthy
It's a
and
lot of work,
strong
huh?
and
So-
inside the fences is a lot of. It's way more work
They
than
get
you
out,
think.
huh?
So are they for milk or for meat or for looks?
Well, all the above. I mean, it depends on who you're at. Are you asking for me?
For you.
Like for me, it's a hobby farm. I mean,
Yeah.
it
That's
started,
like me.
It started as one, I loved the animal, but two, we really sort of our kids needed something material to contribute to. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. We just live in a time where, to no fault of theirs or ours or anybody's, like we have a pretty good life. I mean, you know, even in the lowest economic, statuses of our society, like live better than Kings did, however long ago.
I know.
You know,
It's
like
crazy
to think
running
about.
water, a TV on the wall.
For sure.
But so it's like with kids, it's like, hey, you do your chores. You're like, oh, how hard is it to like vacuum some stairs and like clean a toilet or whatever? So I just wanted them to have something to contribute to where it's like, hey, okay,
Rewarding.
we can go on a family vacation,
Yep.
but we still have these responsibilities that have to be we have to do something. We have to
Accounted
find
for.
someone to feed them.
Yeah,
That's right.
Something has to happen because the consequence of neglecting this is death.
Death, yeah.
Right? Like something that has a consequence where
Yep.
it's not like a complete overburden, like beyond what they can handle. And even to be fair, where our farm is, it's just far enough away from our house right now. We were supposed to have a house done a few years ago. That's a whole nother mess. But, so even they can't help a whole lot yet, just because of the proximity. But we're sort of wrapping up our house where the farm is, and so they'll be there at our house, and
Cool.
be a much bigger part of their daily routine.
Let me tell you what I'm thinking about doing.
That's cool.
So we got a farm too. And I'm more of a fake farmer than Devin is.
This is down in South Utah County, if I remember right, right?
Yeah. So here's the deal. I'm thinking about getting a screaming goat and a fainting goat and just have one just scream at it all day and just keeps fainting. I mean, that could be
I love it, Jeremy. I want to see that.
a thing of beauty. But I'm with you, man. That's the real life, dude.
Well, and I think you're smart because what you're really doing is you're teaching and training your kids how to work, right?
Yeah,
Which is
for sure.
a lost art in a lot of things, a lot of times
Yeah,
these days.
And just consequence of decisions and responsibility and things not always going well. And,
Yeah.
we could never do it commercially. You have to have such scale and scope that I think it's near impossible. It would be for us anyways. And to be fair, a number of years ago, I was planning to have a little bit more time. So we got fairly committed to this, and some dynamics professionally changed for me, just about a year and a half ago. And so we've had to pivot quite a bit, and I've had to bring in full-time help to help me kind of get through this sort of next phase of I guess, my professional career. But it's great. Even my little kids, they love going to be a part of the farm and see the cows, and
Cool.
so it's a big part of our family, and it's good for the kids to see that, like, hey, this is something that has to be done.
Yeah, I like that.
Dad, I want Dad home, but he's out moving the wheel lines, right? Like,
That's right.
Let me go out there with them. Yeah.
yeah, it's so for them to come out, learn how to deal with this stuff, and I'll tell you what, there's I don't even know if I can verbalize this experience that I had, but when we had our first round of calves, it was awesome. And when I learned how to cut our first crops, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Like I'm a guy that loves like the lawnmower, and I like the crisp lines.
Oh, man, I was talking about that today.
If you like that thing,
Oh, yeah.
to do that
On a big scale.
in a tractor, like with a swather,
Yeah.
and to go through and to create your rows,
That would
and
feel
then to
good.
go through and rake it, like it is a phenomenal experience. It's
Oh, yeah.
really tough work, but it is fulfilling. But
It's what my kids call satisfying, Dad. It's so satisfying.
it is satisfying. But
They
but
say that all the time.
But what was especially fulfilling was we had our first, we first brought in some bulls, and then we brought in some cows, and the cows were already bred. So we had calves, and that was great. We had our first couple years of crops. But
This is Cassie Roberts, co-host of Retail War Games. I am thrilled to announce the release of Volcanics Retail University. These certification courses are the result of nearly 2 decades of work involving over 500 brands and countless communications with retail experts. Now, any brand can have their employees learn and certify in the best practices along all retail channels. As a listener of Retail War Games, you can get 50% off using the promo code podcast50. Visit university.volcanicretail.io to learn more.
Once we had our first round of calving from our bulls and our cows who had been raised on grass that we had grown, I don't know why. I don't really know why, but that next set of calves that came, it was this really weird experience, very fulfilling, because it was like these lives don't exist without us doing all that work, right? The bulls and the cows don't survive without us cutting those crops. The calves don't ever show up without these, being put together. So I don't know. It was oddly fulfilling. I wasn't expecting that.
It is crazy different because like the reality is, like my kids, I mean, like everybody else, they just go buy something, like buy a burger at, In-N-Out or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you miss all those steps.
Yeah.
And it is really rewarding to see the whole thing.
Yeah, it is.
Let alone the hard work that they're learning.
It is. And it gives you an appreciation for like what maybe, like most people you ask, like even you two, I'll bet you're not more than maybe one and probably not more than 3 generations removed from farming.
From doing it,
like sustenance, right?
I know.
And so we're not, on one hand, we're not that far away from how we survived as a society, but at the same time we're a million years away from it, just the way technology works, and it's just so foreign to all of us, most people. So it is kind of weird to feel like you're going backwards a little bit, but there is just something special about having your feet in the dirt, and I don't know. I'd never experienced it growing up, so it was a really foreign thing to me, learning how to operate the machinery and run the tractors and the swathers and the rakes and the balers and all the kind of stuff, and all the problems that go with, like everything is just constantly working against you. But it is fulfilling in a way that I really haven't experienced in life in any other setting other than maybe, your own children. But I don't know, there's just something really rich.
And you volunteer for that. That's the thing is like, you've been very successful, right? CEO of First Mile and your experience with Rakuten and everything else. You're choosing that lifestyle. It's not like you have to do it.
Don't remind me. It's like sometimes, I'm in a tractor, the baler just broke, it's 100 degrees outside, you're covered in hay, and I'm sitting there in the tractor like thinking,
why
am I doing
what is happening?
Why did I choose to be in this spot? I could be golfing.
So my first experience, so First Mile, you've got 11 fulfillment houses? Is that right?
No,
what do you got? You got a lot. Something.
Yes and no. The technical answer is no. Philosophically, what you're saying is correct, but probably it's worth noting that so our logistics ecosystem is really comprised of 2 main companies.
Okay.
First Mile is totally separate from our second company, which is called Ship Network. Ship Network is the network that has the warehousing.
Oh, interesting.
So Ship Network has 300-400 employees around the United States, warehouses where we can do distributed inventory and pick and pack fulfillment. So we have products in warehouses that we're pulling off the shelves on behalf of our clients' orders and optimizing warehouses so that orders are getting to the end consumer as quick as possible for as least amount of money as possible, so that we can say, hey, your inventory is in our network. As your order comes in, which facility has this SKU, which of those is closest to your consumer, so we can get it there quickly and affordably. But that's totally different from First Mile, actually. First Mile, if you're putting it in like transportation buckets, is a carrier. So it works with the same type of customers, but customers who have their own warehouses or we have probably 40 or 50 clients that are also fulfillment companies.
Oh, interesting.
And also offer pick and pack and distribution for other clients. So, e-commerce is just so massive. It's such a huge
bigger
ocean.
umbrella. Interesting.
And so you think of all the products sold on Amazon or all the advertisements you see on Instagram, clothing companies, vitamins, health and beauty, that's our wheelhouse, stuff going direct to consumer. And so First Mile comes in and says, hey, we want to win your business from your incumbent. Maybe that's FedEx, or maybe it's the post office or something, but we want to win your business. So we have a lot that goes on behind the scenes that enables us to compete with the FedExes of the world, without owning every plane, train, and automobile to deliver packages to every country in the world.
Sure.
So
Interesting.
it's a lot of technology. It's a decent amount of assets that we run around the United States to connect line hauls, and we move stuff in the air. But we're optimizing networks to offer as competitive a price as we can, but in an optimized fashion. So our customers can just say, hey, I just need this delivered in 3 to 5 days. They give it to one truck that shows up, and we get there, whether it's 200 or 20,000 orders that day delivered around the world, in these buckets of time and transit expectations that they have.
Oh, man.
So my question, Devin, for you is, this is awesome. You were at Utah State, you were doing sales, and then we jumped to, you're loving your hobby farm up there in the Heber Valley, and that's awesome. How did you get from there to, owning these companies at First Mile? And
the question.
What does all that gap look like?
That's a long story. I guess I can give you the very short version. It's a little bit bloody and embarrassing, to be frank.
As it is for any entrepreneur, right?
Yeah,
That tells their
I
story.
don't know. I mean, it is for me. I had gotten into the door-to-door stuff.
Yeah.
Met some incredible mentors. I was so lucky to end up where I ended up. It didn't end well, but I got to know, even today, probably a lot of the companies that Silicon Slopes touches are ran by people that I was knocking doors with in those early days.
Oh, yeah.
So I met some incredible people, learned from some incredible people, and I did fairly well for my early 20s, and probably got a little bit of an ego from it and thought I had a magic touch, but anyone hustling to any degree pre-2008 had a magic touch. Money just flowed like water.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If you just had a pulse and a $10,000 a year salary, you could probably get a $500,000 mortgage. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Oh,
Yeah.
And so I did pretty well professionally. I did some stuff in real estate, but I made some really poor decisions with some of the resources and assets we had, and where I had chosen to invest some of that. And really long story short, those decisions didn't turn out very well, and I lost everything right before we got married. I'm bankrupt, not knowing how I'm gonna live the next week. And that was hard.
all
It
your
was
real
hard
estate,
financially,
all your
all of it,
assets,
because
everything was gone.
even I think I had 6 or 7 rental properties at that time.
Wow.
But 4 of them weren't occupied. 3 of them were. So I was trying to float the mortgages of all of them on the
man.
income of the 3. And so it was this game of okay,
yeah.
pay this mortgage this month, that one, that, and you just putting out the next hottest fire. And after about 6, 8, 10, 12 months, everyone's all of a sudden 2, 3, 4, 6 months behind on payments. The dominoes are falling. It was
It was
absolute hell.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, and more than anything, it was humiliating because I had done well. I had gotten engaged, and I had these nice cars. I had this house that was too nice. I shouldn't have been living in, definitely. And I could afford it at that time, but I wasn't really putting much cash away. And in fact, all the cash I had put away, I had gambled with, right? I had invested with somebody, and so when that basket falls and all the eggs are in it,
But,
the dominoes start falling.
I think that's what you see a lot of times with successful entrepreneurs is there's a feeling in each of them that I'm going to gamble on myself, and they don't really, like, I know for me, like, this is a very similar time frame, very similar story. Like, I went through grad school, top of the world, and then I ended up selling cardboard toilets because the economy crashed, right? But this is something that I see as like a common thread of people that are really successful is it's not that they're not processing that things could go wrong, but their confidence level in, look, I'm going to make this work is pretty high. And so when there's things outside of your control, like the government meltdown,
Yeah.
I mean, it can hit the ego.
Yeah, big time. And there is something to that, at least for me after the fact. I wasn't real positive during it. I was depressed, miserable. I was humiliated because I was supposed to be a dude. I was supposed to be productive.
Yep.
I felt like I felt like I knew what my potential was, and I was just performing so far below it after coming out of this. I just felt like I wasn't the person who's in my skin. I don't know. It was just so embarrassing and humiliating. And I ended up in a job that I didn't really love. And so I was just doing stuff I had to do. And I dropped out of college. I would have taken any job I could have gotten. But at that point, after the crash, like every resume, the first filter was, where'd you graduate, right? So like I couldn't be an executive assistant. I couldn't do anything from an official standpoint. So I ended up, in a situation where I was back to selling door to door. I was selling shipping door to door during the days, which, when you're making a penny a package or a nickel a package, like you gotta really have a lot of volume to even like eat dinner at McDonald's. So there's nothing to raise a family on. And but I was trying to build up a customer base, not because I wanted to, not because I had an idea of something I was building that would be First Mile. Like that wasn't anywhere on my radar. It was just
survive.
I can maybe build something to pay some bills.
Yeah.
And then at nights I would go back to selling Dish Network door to door. I just got my own little retailership with Dish. I had a little an installer guy that I knew from back in the day who I'd call him and say, hey, here's 3 addresses. When can you set them up? And so we lived off the money I would make at nights, door to door, selling Dish Network. And while I was trying to build this book of business. So, I did that for 3 or 4 years.
So was that your first introduction to shipping?
Yep.
You started learning it from
that
standpoint.
and through that process,
Okay.
I built up a customer base. I figured out some technologies or where there were huge technology deficiencies, and I started learning like and again, I wasn't like trying to invent this thing. I was just like, okay, I've got this customer with this problem. Maybe if I do this, I can solve that problem and I can preserve my income. And then I realized, oh, well, if I've got a solution to that problem for that guy, maybe it's a solution for that guy,
That's right. That's right.
And it just kind of starts
There's the
connecting
entrepreneur
dots.
coming out right there.
There it
We
is.
just saw it.
And
Yep.
so it's
That's
like,
awesome.
so eventually I started to formulate, okay, if I pivot, I had like 6 major pivots. And that's what eventually became First Mile, and we were doing fulfillment during this time out of pure necessity.
You guys hustled. Like the first time that I saw anything about First Mile is one of the outdoor retail shows I went to, maybe like 2010 or something. And I saw all these like green 3x5 cards that said First Mile on them. This is right when you started it, and you're probably the guy handing them out.
That would have been probably our first year as First Mile, because we didn't even go by First Mile for the first like 3 or 4 years. So that was real early days.
Yeah, that was. I just remember thinking. I literally remember this moment. Like it like just I was sitting between booths. I just saw that at every booth I went to, and I was like, that was a good idea. And it's interesting to meet the person that started it, 10 or 15 years later on the other side. And you're like, oh, that was the guy behind the card I was looking at.
We gotta go set out more cards, man.
Yeah, I want to hear about this marketing strategy. So it was just green cards.
I don't even remember.
You had
I
written
do.
First Mile on it or something?
They were probably printed.
Yeah, printed.
Okay.
It was
Yeah.
nice. It was like a neon green or something.
Just
I don't
with
know
a
if
discount?
did you have people with T-shirts on?
I think we had 1 or 2 sales guys there. I was there
with green shirts
and
or something.
I think we'd go talk to booths. I think we'd also leave cards on booths and just hope people would just
And it just
Leave
showed
'em
like a
alone.
website or something.
I'm pretty
I think
sure.
it just said First Mile
Just
on it.
First
And,
Mile.
and probably a website.
Okay.
I might be
Okay.
wrong on this, but I think this is true that like early in those days, the brands didn't walk around like unified with like the shirt of the brand that they were representing or the company.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first one I noticed where I was like, oh, they're all dressed the same. I'm pretty sure that was your company. And there's like 3 or 4 people. I'm like, oh, what is this company that's kind of walking around here taking
Yeah.
over?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was smart, and
That's-
now it's kind of a thing, but it was innovative at the time.
Well,
big time.
look what you pioneered.
Yeah,
Devin,
dude.
this is fantastic.
I'm giving you credit on that one.
The
You're
3x5
kinda like,
card marketing strategy.
dude, you're kind of like,
Write a book, right?
you remind me of like, Cinderella Man, Russell Crowe.
The boxer?
Yeah. That's like the story of Cinderella Man. Like living really high, the Great Depression hits, and all of a sudden you just realize like, oh man, I can't afford to keep the lights on. And
Yeah.
then what he does after that, where he just kind of builds back up.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of your story. Like, that's crazy.
Okay, kids on social media. It's been all over the news. Even the Surgeon General has issued a warning about social media's impact on your young mental health. As parents, we need to connect with our kids, but we don't want to hand over the whole internet to them. So what do? Gab is the solution. They are the leading safe tech company for kids. They have engineered phones and watches without social media or internet browser apps, but with all the good stuff kids want, like safe music, streaming, and messaging. Use code WARGAMES the whole month of July for 50% off a safe Gab device. Gab, safely connected.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. I mean, it's funny, and that's why I had a kid call me the other day asking he was in an entrepreneur class and asked for some advice, and I like the sentiment of, things like do what you love, but in practice I don't, because you don't know what you love yet,
Yeah.
usually. Like, when you're 16, 18, when you're 26, like,
Yeah, you don't know.
I don't know if you even really know what you're good at yet. Like, nobody in 6th grade is writing down on a piece of paper that they want to be in shipping when they grow up. I guarantee it.
Yeah, it's true.
And even when I was in it, I didn't like it, because I was doing billing, I was doing billing early in the morning. I was doing sales in the afternoon. I was driving my Jeep picking up packages in the evenings. I was in the mail terminals at nights trying to get packages where they need to go. I wasn't getting home till 2 a.m. All my friends were out, group dates and stuff. And I'm like, I can't. I got to make this $75 to pay my cell phone bill, And I was just like, I felt handcuffed and whatever, but I had to pay the bills, but I was learning. So I don't think it's as much about do what you love. It's maybe more about love what you do, even if you don't enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And like, pay attention to your surroundings, pay attention to the relationships you're making. Like, look for problems and look for common problems and be aware, because it's funny, like after grinding for 5 or 6 years and just being in almost a fog, like if you asked me then what I'd want to do when I grow up, I would then, and probably still today, say I can't think of doing something that I like more or that brings more fulfillment. But it didn't start that way. It didn't start like saying I love this. It's like
you can find like in any category that you're in the workplace. Once you become like a master of, the realm, everything becomes interesting. And that's what you probably weren't, you didn't have all that information early on. But then all of a sudden, all the different players, what tweaks alter what. And that's kind of where it happens. I remember I was chatting with Lori Grenier for some reason. And she's the one who taught me to this phrase.
I just called Lori one day. We're just shooting the breeze.
But she was saying,
I love that.
She introduced this to me. She just said, do right now things that other people won't, so that in the future you can do things that other people can't. And
makes a lot of
that's
sense.
where you're at, man. I mean, that's the cattle.
So that sounds like now you
Gotten-
love it. You love what you're doing.
I do. I mean, I'm back in a bit of a fog. What happened was in 2019 I sold our company.
Oh, you did? To private equity or
No,
to?
a huge Japanese company called Rakuten.
Okay.
Incredible story. Talk about an amazing story.
So
Hiroshi
great exit for you
Mikitani
and your
was,
family.
Yeah, I mean, not changing generations or anything, but
Okay.
for that time, you know, it helped us like stabilize a little bit of a foundation for our family.
They're like the Amazon of Japan.
Very
Yeah, like,
massive,
Okay.
massive,
yeah,
massive.
very comparable.
yeah.
And they got into the United States, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 something years ago, and built up, like, they have some really amazing things. A lot of people recognize them. They're the jersey sponsor for the Golden State
Got
Warriors.
it.
So you see Rakuten on the jersey.
Yeah,
A
right,
lot of
right.
people recognize them from that. And they were really phenomenal people to work with.
So their acquisition their strategy for growth was acquisition, going and acquiring these
I
smaller,
think so. Like
shipping
they
and-
do so much stuff. Like you probably couldn't say this is a strategy for this, because like they're in healthcare, they're solving for cancer, they're in marketing, for a time they were in logistics, right?
They're like
and-
G&E out here. They're just like everywhere.
They're
yeah,
massive.
and really
Okay.
short
That's
version of
crazy.
how it worked with us was they had many years ago bought a company that did fulfillment. They just had a couple little locations, and they grew that to 6 or 7 locations. And the CEO of that company had gone to their board in I think Japan and said, look, here's a 6-7 year plan to really grow in the United States. We're gonna build out in these 25 U.S. cities. We're gonna do this thing. Not I don't think to compete with Amazon, but just to have an answer to it, and to be able to have a distributed inventory model similar to that. But a big part of that business is actually transportation, maybe a bigger part. And so, because when you think about Amazon, like, yeah, they got a bunch of warehouses, but it's the delivery side that everyone
Exactly.
like blows their mind, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yep.
not everyone can do it like them, because not everyone can lose billions of dollars a quarter and still like have their stock price go up. But you know, it's a very powerful thing. And so that was, now this conversation took 18 months. So I'm just like really giving a simplified version of it. But that was the thing that drove, I guess, their inquiry and the eventual acquisition of our company, because in an effort to build that distributed inventory model, they needed the logistical expertise, the technology, and the assets that we had. And not only that, we had a secondary company that did fulfillment. And so you have this 6 or 7 location fulfillment business that had gone to Japan and said, hey, in order to pull off this bigger strategy, we need to buy this transportation company. By the way, they also have this small fulfillment business that will become location 8 in our fulfillment network, and then we'll start integrating this transportation network. And so that's why there was an eventual acquisition of our 2 companies. And then you fast forward 4 or 5 years. I was on a contract, and I was on an earnout. And right towards the end of the earnout, like literally months before I was done for good, which was tough because I knew for 4 years when I was getting fired, you know. And it was, so it's good on one hand because the companies were very well prepared to move on without me. And Japan, for a number of reasons, had decided to divest of that particular division, and it had grown quite a bit. I mean, we had tripled or quadrupled in size. The fulfillment business had gone from like 6 or 7 locations to 12, but it just wasn't. Even though it was huge in our minds, to them they deal with billions and trillions. So this little thing is like kind of just a distraction, maybe, I don't know. But they put the division up for sale, and it got under contract, and it ended up not working out. And I was sort of on my way, not to retirement, but for a year, I knew I was getting fired. So I had made some pretty material commitments of my resources and time with, you know, a service station we got up where I live, and a restaurant, and some developments that we're in the middle of doing, because I knew that a big part of my bandwidth was going to be freeing up very soon. But
And then they said, never mind.
Just
kidding.
how
You're
life
still
works
here."
out. Like all of a sudden I find myself on a phone call, and we're joking about me maybe buying these companies back, like being very hyperbolic, you know, and then that turns into like semi-serious.
Jeez.
And then one night I literally can't sleep. And so I sit up on my laptop, and I don't talk to my wife. I don't talk to an attorney. I just open a Word document and basically say like, hey, to whom it may concern, here's an interest in maybe acquiring these companies. Here's a structure that, you know, could work. And
It's a big name to acquire.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't buy Rakuten.
Yeah. You
I
bought back
just
the other
one of their
stuff.
little itty bitty tiny divisions.
Yeah, but that's still.
But for me, it was big because at that time, Consolidated, maybe there's 400 or 500 employees. It's just very heavy. A lot of real estate stuff going on all over the country.
Where were your warehouses?
Crazy.
Where were you doing business out of?
We have facilities in at that time: New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Atlanta,
So
Austin,
nationwide,
Houston,
really, not just
Denver,
local.
LA, yeah, all over.
Awesome.
And so, long story short, those conversations ended up materializing to my sort of shock and gratitude. It ended up working out. So it was a massive disruption to our life because we were going down this path, and now I find myself on this path. But all the resources and time I had set aside for this now have to get moved over here. And so it just kind of created some chaos. But, my wife's been amazing. Our kids have been super supportive. We have phenomenal leadership in all of our companies. That was one of the blessings of this kind of earn-out structure is we already had phenomenal leadership and management in place. So, that hasn't been as big a deal. We have amazing customers. And so that's where we're at now. And
So let me ask you a couple questions. So we got obviously a pod with a ton of brands listening in. What advice would you give them when they're looking at fulfillment houses? Like what part of their stage should they go from, hey, I've got stuff in my garage, to, hey, I actually need a real 3PL, because there's a lot of fees associated with 3PLs. You got pick and pack fees, you have daily pallet fees. What's your recommendation if you were to start a brand? What recommendation would you give them?
Well, it's probably a decision that, to be fair, you have to make a number of times throughout that kind of life cycle of your business. So, like, the answer you have today isn't and shouldn't be the same 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and 7 years from now, potentially. What I mean by that is when you're launching a brand, don't waste your money on fulfillment. Like, you just got to blood, sweat, and tears the thing, late hours, late nights,
right.
Loop in your cousins and your brothers and your sisters, and
So
just
bootstrap
make
it up.
bootstrap the heck out of it for as long as you can. Now, at some point, probably about that time, you're getting traction and you're not fighting for every sale and things are becoming consistent. You've got to go from your basement to your garage and your garage to your neighbor's garage, and then you're going to go get a smaller warehouse. At some point, you do have to decide, do I want to run a warehouse or do I want to run my product business?
That's right.
And sometimes they're somewhat, you can't really separate them. Like maybe you make something that requires you to be involved in a very intimate way where you're already going to have these fixed costs because you've got to have a warehouse to make your XYZ thing, and it's small, so you can warehouse a lot of it without any, sort of below the line change, but that's not usually the case. And so there are a lot of fees. It's a very expensive business, especially the last 4 or 5 years. Like from our perspective, this is the worst time to be a fulfillment company because post-COVID, like probably the number one real estate price increases have been in flex space, in warehousing. Because everyone went from these office spaces to warehouses. They all still needed a little bit of space to work from, but they all just want to put their stuff in a warehouse.
You can't find
and
them
put
right
everyone
now.
home. So
yeah, it's hard.
Like it's been hard to get warehouses. All the investment dollars have gone to these big, huge, beautiful warehouses because leases have been phenomenal. They've been going up, 80%, 90%, 200%. We just left a facility in New Jersey and went into a second location of Pennsylvania because our lease was going up like 300%. And they'll get it. And so there's nothing you can do about it. But if you're a brand owner, you're taking the brunt of that also, and payroll and labor and all the stuff that goes with it. So at some point you've got to decide, is my time better well spent focusing on building and selling and marketing my product, or is it doing that and also figuring out who's doing the receiving and figure out how we're going to do inventory management and figuring out how are we going to do all this stuff behind the scenes? And so there's a whole bunch of inputs and variables in making the best decision there. But philosophically, that answer might, for the time being, be, we'll do it all. But at some point, you've got to probably look in the mirror and say, okay, where's my time best spent?
Yep, opportunity cost.
Wise counsel.
So as far as what is your recommendation for warehouse management systems, WMS? If you're, what ones that you've had success with, if you're a brand looking and you want to be able to track, inventory as it moves and sales as it moves, what would you recommend?
Well, it depends on what hat I'm wearing, right? So from a ship network perspective, if I'm being the sales guy, right? You don't need that per se. Our technology does that for you, right? You need an order management system that's managing all the orders coming in from, assuming you're a multi-channel seller.
Yep.
You've got to be able to really nail that. But by the time you've gotten those orders in and into a state that they're ready to go, and then you push them through to a network like ours, we're managing your inventory, pushing it back to your places, and dealing with all of that. So that's not a huge need. The order management side is a much bigger lift. Now, on the first mile side, all of our clients in first mile are running their own warehouses, either as a 3PL or they're doing it themselves. And there's thousands of those. And I think the most critical thing, just from a transportation perspective, is understanding that what we deal with today and where we're at today is not the same as 3 years ago or 5 years ago, and won't be the same 6 years from now. So you've got to be dynamic. No longer can you be just hiring a good warehouse manager who can go and negotiate a good FedEx contract this year because he can leverage your UPS rates. And then 2 years from now, go and leverage your FedEx contract to go get better UPS rates, and then fill in the gaps with a little bit of USPS. That's been the standard quo, the status quo for probably 10 years. But that doesn't really work anymore from a competitive landscape. You've got to be able to understand that you've got to be more dynamic, not just from a carrier perspective, but you've got to realize now that there are holiday surcharges now that last until April. It's not the holidays anymore, right? But you've got to be able to look at your orders and dynamically route orders around all of these variables. You don't know what they're going to be, so you can't game plan that per se, but you've got to be able to be flexible in that, okay, tomorrow if my carrier partner changes the way that they calculate cubic dimensions, or the post office just did that a few times in the last 18 months. You've got to be able to dynamically route around those variables. Otherwise, you'll end up in a spot that's really bad to be, where you don't have any other real choices, and you're getting fleeced. That's maybe not even the right word. You're just not taking advantage of the things that you could otherwise be if you were in a better position to do it. And that's a combination of assets and technology, because you can hire the world's best warehouse manager. You can go get the world's best TMS software, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them now. You can have a great warehouse, and you can go negotiate 10 great transportation contracts. But the problem that First Mile solves for is, even if you go and do all that today, and your all-star warehouse manager creates routing codes for every zip code in America with these 10 carriers you just negotiated the world's best contracts with, at 5 p.m., you've still got to get all these packages into the trucks of 10 different trucks now sitting at your same 2 dock doors between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. You've now got 10 different tracking websites, 10 different claims departments, 10 different customer service departments to deal with. Jeez. Not only that, but you've gone from being a 1,000 a day shipper with 1 or 2 carriers to a 100 a day shipper with 10 carriers, and that spend leverage has been diluted. And so there's really incredible technology, at checkout, post-purchase, managing the warehouses, but there's not been much evolution once the packages are on the dock, right? You've got all this great stuff, and now if you've got 7 carrier contracts, you've got 7 trucks waiting to pick up packages. How inefficient is that, right? And it's a nightmare for your warehouse to manage. And so at its core, that's the problem that First Mile solves, is you've said, hey, I just need this delivered in 3 to 5 days. You give us 1,000 packages, They might get routed through one network. They might get routed through 15, depending on what you're shipping, size, weight, zone, where it's coming from. Is it coming from one facility or 15 facilities? You know, and throughout the year, as fees change, surcharges change, all this stuff is changing these inputs. That's changing these routing decisions. But the point is, or the important part is, to understand the expectations of your buyer, and aligning your transportation and distribution strategy to meet or exceed those expectations for as little as possible, obviously.
So let me ask you a question before we wrap up. So with your company, you've got two different types of fulfillment houses. You've got those that focus on, pallets, and they, selling to retail stores using EDI, whether it's, Datatrans or SPS Commerce or whatever. And then you've also got fulfillment houses that specialize in pick pack fees, Instagram brands. Where do you guys fall?
Well, our core DNA on the Ship Network side has been e-commerce, direct to consumer, and that's probably where we'll always be at our core.
Health, beauty, wellness, or what are the categories that are?
Everything except for, we don't do like home goods. Like, we don't do furniture. We're not coming to install, your new exercise bike. That's a whole different business segment. Clothing, vitamins, cell phone accessories, electronics, lightweight stuff. That's been our wheelhouse, the stuff getting delivered direct to consumer. However, it's the dream of every brand, either well-placed or not, to be putting their products in Walmart or Target or Nordstrom's or Home Depot. And so we have built out our technology stack and have gotten very good at supporting our brands into their retail
really
distribution.
Cool. You do
we
both.
have all the EDI connections, the routing guides, and all that stuff, because not because we're going to market to try and get into like just traditional distribution, but because most of our e-commerce brands at some point at least want to get into brick and mortar distribution, and we want to be able to accommodate that when the time is right for them to do that. They don't have to go and add another warehouse or a new location or separate out their inventory and go give it to this guy. Like, if you're ready to launch, we've got a client just last year. They launched into Nordstrom's and they're kicking butt. There's a whole nother set of decision making that's got to be done. Like, it sounds great to go into retail. There's a whole chain of consequences if you do that. You've got to be ready for. But if you're ready for that, we can support both. But we're showing up, talking to our clients about their e-commerce business. That's kind of our core, or maybe not even e-commerce. Like, we do a lot of direct sales companies. So direct to consumer shipping is probably more accurate to say, but we do now a significant amount of B2B as well.
And fascinating. We learned so much, Devin. This has been so great having you here with us today.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks
thanks.
for taking
Great to be
some
here.
time.
Super cool for you to come
Way
and
cool.
share that. That's a lot of good information for, all the brands are looking in and making sure that their order of operations is correct. They're jumping at the right time. And so real quick, what's the URL? What's the website?
Firstmile.com and shipnetwork.com.
Perfect.
Just like Dish Network, but Ship Network.
Okay, we'll do it.
And First Mile, just the way it sounds. But
Okay.
thanks for having me, man. I'm
Thank you,
super
Devin.
stoked to see how this thing works with Volcanic, because
right.
talk about a huge vacuum. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah, we hear
it
you.
will be something special. So
Lots
Awesome,
of
man.
problems
That's exciting.
being solved.
yeah,
Thank you much.
Thanks, Devin.
thanks.
See ya.
Are you a CEO wanting to ensure that your team excels in retail? Enroll them in Volcanic Retail University today. Gain access to comprehensive training and the latest industry insights. Visit university.volcanicretail.io and use code podcast50 for a 50% off discount.